Thank you for listening to the Spectrum Lounge. If you enjoy this podcast, please support us at patreon.com/filmfatale_NYC. And be sure to subscribe to the Spectrum Lounge. You can find us on SoundCloud, Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Welcome to the Spectrum Lounge podcast, where we discuss creators of color disrupting the game in TV, film, and pop culture. I am your host, Rebecca Theodore-Vachon, and on this episode, I'm joined by Robert Young as we review episode 4 of the Disney animated series What If, titled What If Doctor Strange Lost His Heart Instead of His Hands? Hi, Robert.
Hey, Rebecca.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Like, this is what I live for. Like, listen, I love all of our recaps. I enjoy doing this with you. And I think you and I are in agreement that What If is that bitch. Okay.
It really is.
It really is. And I've loved episode 3, I liked it. 1 and 2, great. 3 was good. This episode, that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Marvel's doing big things in this one.
Well, what was it that you told me when you saw like that whole thing about Marvel not being able to do something or people's assumptions?
Oh yeah, I was just saying, I always keep hearing that Marvel doesn't know how to do dark, and I think this is the darkest superhero thing I've ever seen. Like in the best of ways.
Yes. Can I just tell you that the last 5 minutes, I mean, we'll get to it. Number 1, major spoilers. If you have not seen episode 4, as with all of my recaps and reviews, if you haven't seen it, go watch it first because my reviews and recaps are full of spoilers. Robert. I was like, for real though? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So, I'll give the ball to you. You can set us up, our listeners up, as to the synopsis and how this episode starts. What is the premise of this episode?
The premise, if you just read it, it's kind of confusing, I think, to a lot of people. But the premise is if Doctor Strange lost the love of his life instead of, damaging his hands, how that would change him as the Sorcerer Supreme.
Yes. Let me tell you something. I mean, you and I, with the introduction of Doctor Strange into the MCU, the casting of Benedict Cumberbatch, I was like, yeah, I could have gotten a person of color. Yeah, like Pedro Pascal was right there. You know what I mean? Like we had quite a few candidates, but it's not a knock against Benedict Cumberbatch. He's actually a very fine actor. But I mean, you and I, we both saw the original Doctor Strange. When did it come out? 2016, 2017?
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't impressed with the live action movie.
There's things I love about it, like their implementation of magic in the MCU as far as the effects and stuff is like top notch. Like the way they did that was like perfect. I was wondering how they were going to do magic. But the story and whatever.
He said, "Oh, whatever." Yeah. I think what we remarked, an observation that we shared was that while I think a lot of it had to do with the writing, like I don't think they really had a specific grasp on who Stephen Strange was.
I agree.
And so what's interesting, and I think both you and I had observed this, is that his appearance in other MCU movies were way more interesting, right? Like starting with his cameo in Thor Ragnarok, right? His interaction with Thor. I thought it was quite funny. He had like this very dry, that dry British humor, right? While he's not British in this movie, in his appearances in the MCU, Benedict Cumberbatch is British, or from, I was just like, okay, that's funny. And then I liked him in Infinity War. I kind of liked his interaction with Tony, because they're both arrogant pricks, right?
Yeah, kind of like in different ways, but yeah.
Yeah, but this episode of What If, as we know, Benedict Cumberbatch does come back to voice Doctor Strange, as well as Rachel McAdams, who played Christine. And then who else do we have back?
The actor that plays Wong is back.
Yes, Benedict Wong. Yes. And so, yeah. So I'll start with, what were your initial thoughts of episode 4?
This kind of blew me away because once I saw that the episode was Doctor Strange, I was like, okay, let's see where this goes. But like, it really kicked off like pretty quickly that I got interested, in the whole premise of it.
Right.
And the very first scene with the Watcher looking over the city talking, it made me think of our conversation last week when you were like, the Watcher is interacting a whole lot more too.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
We have to talk about that. So yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. So with the cast, Benedict Cumberbatch is back as Stephen Strange. Rachel McAdams voices Christine Palmer. Tilda Swinton is back as the Ancient One, and as Robert mentioned, Benedict Wong is back as Wong. Oh, I just realized that. Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm just gonna keep saying this for every recap and review of What If. Jeffrey motherfucking Wright. Like, his voiceover
so good.
And we really get to see how good he is in this episode, right? Because something happens at the end where it's like, oh, okay, yeah. And Jeffrey Wright definitely brings his A game in this performance. So kick us off with how this episode starts and what the premise is, and what if premise is.
So the basically the what if premise is, in the movie, that portion of the movie where Doctor Strange is driving to, I guess, an award ceremony, instead of driving by himself this time, he's driving with Christine, Rachel McAdams' character.
Right.
And in the crash, instead of his hands being damaged, she is killed.
So they use the kill the girlfriend fridge trope.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to ask you that. Like, what do you think of this, since it's a what if episode and, this didn't happen in the main timeline? What do you think of the fridging the girlfriend for this what if?
I mean, it's a trope. I think it's kind of played out. That being said, it's how you use that trope, right? While a trope can be redundant and it can be a little bit overused, what they did here, at least, and I want to give credit to the writer, the head writer of What If is A.C. Bradley, who is a woman, by the way. I did not know this. And I'm fascinated by her writing. And so actually having a woman write this episode makes it a little bit different, right? Like, I think if a guy had written a girlfriend being fridged, because I think, at least in my opinion, Christine's death, right? And then we see that Strange is so tortured and racked with sadness and grief over the death of Christine. It does follow the other timeline. It does follow the other steps. He does become the Sorcerer Supreme. He does become Doctor Strange. He practices the mystic arts. The Ancient One dies. So a lot of similar beats from the Doctor Strange live action movie are also in this reality. The only difference is that Christine is now dead.
Right.
And so, so it does set him on this dangerous path. He is the holder of the time stone, and he uses it to bring Christine back. And so oh man, that scene was that whole montage was
multiple times. That was painful to watch.
It was painful to watch. Like, he was like, okay, so he brings himself back to the point where he picks her up to go to the dinner. The first time he drives, because the original in the original timeline, he cut or went behind a truck, right? Like, kind of driving recklessly, and then another car hit them from behind and they went over an embankment. Right. So this time, when he goes and uses the time stone to try to prevent Christine's death, this time he doesn't cut the truck in front of him. He's just like, I'm just gonna slow down. But they still get hit by a car. and then the other, and then it's just like all this. She gets hit by a truck. It just, isn't there one where she chokes on a pizza or something like that? I forget. It was just like they were in a
No,
pizza
they were in
shop.
the pizza. They were in the pizzeria, and a burglar came in and
Oh
shot
my
her.
goodness. So no
Yeah,
matter what he does, and then there's one, this is the one that really hurt. He doesn't pick her up at all. She's just left standing there. He
he
stands her up.
ghosted her.
And he ghosted her. He was like, listen, if I don't pick her up and take her to this party, she will live. And then wasn't there an explosion in her building or
Yeah, her
something like?
building exploded.
You know what this episode reminded me of? Because it kind of reminds me of certain sci-fi movies and TV shows. When they're done and they're written correctly, it hurts. Number one, I think about Supernatural, which is one of my favorite TV series. There is an episode, I believe it's in season 3 or 4, that's called The Mystery Spot.
Okay.
And the premise of Supernatural is that Sam and Dean are brothers who are sort of like demon hunters and vampire hunters. They're on the road. They go from town to town, basically helping people. And so in season 3, the premise was that Dean had basically sold his. At the end of season 2, Sam had been killed, and then Dean sold his soul to a demon. Bargained his soul.
Wow.
He was like, if you can bring my brother back, you can have my soul. And so the demon is like, you have 1 year and then I'm going to collect. Right. And so this episode of The Mystery Spot is sort of like a standalone episode. And whenever I suggest Supernatural to people, I always bring them to that episode. I was like, if you want to know about watch that, because the dynamics between. But so basically in this episode of Mystery Spot, they wake up on a Wednesday and it just becomes like a Groundhog Day where Dean repeatedly dies. All these different ways. And so Sam kind of does the same thing that Doctor Strange does. He tries, not to take him to, he's like, well, don't order this, don't do this, let's not go to the, and no matter what they do, Dean ends up dying. He ends up dying. And we come to find out, there's no spoilers here. If you haven't seen this episode of Supernatural, I mean, it is what it is. It's been out for 10 years. But basically, we find out that it was the trickster god Loki. Haha, MCU connection here. They have a Loki in Supernatural. And he basically, it was a reality that he created for Sam because he was like, I need you. It was a fucked up thing for Loki to do, but he was like, I'm trying to get you to let go of your brother. He doesn't have much time left. And I'm trying to get you to start understanding what your life is going to look like without him.
Wow.
Stop holding on to him. Stop. And Loki says something, because this is something throughout Supernatural, is that while they have a very loving bond with each other, they have a very dysfunctional bond as well.
Okay.
And throughout the 15 seasons, there's this cycle of someone dying and one of them sacrificing themselves to save the other. And then, whenever you make a deal with the devil, there's always consequences to that. So Loki was, in his own messed up way, was trying to wake Sam up. He was like, your brother's going to die. The demon is coming. You guys have tried everything. You can't break it. And what are you going to do? Like, you have to figure out how you're going to live your life without your brother, because you guys have a very dysfunctional relationship, right? A very codependent relationship. So I feel like this is kind of what AC Bradley, the writer in Doctor Strange, is trying to say. Like, at least when I watch Doctor Strange, I mean, I'm sure people will be like, oh, the fridging the girlfriend trope. Yes, absolutely. Also, what I am getting out of that story is it's really more of a plot device. Well, yes, it is problematic, but what AC Bradley is really saying, at least to me, it's about when we hold on to trauma and when we hold on to pain, because she died and the Ancient One told her. He was like, Christine's dying is an absolute point, right? After he does all these multiple ways to bring Christine back, the Ancient One comes through and basically is like, Strange, you got to stop this. This is, I mean, it's torture to just watch this at this point. She was like, you cannot bring Christine's death back. And Strange asks why. And she says, this is an absolute point. That Christine's death cannot be changed. Because of Christine dying, that's how you get into the mystic arts. That's how you become Doctor Strange. That's how you defeat Dormammu, right? That's the demon.
Right.
And he doesn't listen.
Nope. Which I guess isn't surprising. It kind of made me think back to the Spider-Man trailer we just watched, where people are like, "Would
Mm-hmm.
Strange really do that?" And like, you know what? He kind of would.
And we see what would happen if he does.
Yeah.
It's oh, it's so good. This episode, like, I was just sitting there like, wow. So yeah, so we see the Ancient One try to make, she's basically telling Strange to stand down. I know it's hard, but you got to let her go. And he refuses to. And so he uses the time stone and basically goes back in time into a place in time where the Ancient One can't find him. And basically he's on the lookout for the Library of Cagliostro, right? Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Yep.
Okay, so you can run with it. So what happens then?
Yeah. Oh, I just wanted to say before that, but like
Mm-hmm.
right before he teleports away, the Ancient One splits him into two, which we find out a little bit later. But she
Yes.
splits him into two Doctor Stranges in the same timeline.
Mm-hmm. So there's the Doctor Strange that does not use the time stone to get Christine back. He just goes up and gets tea. And then we
Right.
have this Doctor Strange that actually does try to
Yes.
find Christine. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, he teleports to this giant library of Cagliostro, at least the dimension where it's at.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you remember, but that's the book of Cagliostro is the book that Caecilius used in the Doctor Strange movie to contact Dormammu.
No, I did not know. You see, I don't remember
Yeah,
much about Doctor
yeah.
Strange.
That entire book is the book of a dark mystic arts.
Oh boy.
So it deals with all kinds of stuff like that.
Right, right. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. Cagliostro is basically like he's a literary character. Doesn't he show up in Spawn? I feel like the Cagliostro
You
characters in
know
Spawn
what?
as
That
well.
name sounds familiar in Spawn. Yeah,
I'm
it
gonna
does
look it
sound
up,
familiar.
but I'm pretty sure that there is a character with a similar name.
Yeah.
We'll look it up. Yes, but continue.
But yeah, once he transports there, he finds these wards and he starts he gets rid of one of the wards, but when he tries to continue on moving, like all these other wards pop up and they kind of like open up the floor under him and he falls down into this like dark pit where
Mm-hmm.
this person walks up to him and he keeps on asking the guy where's the library. Did you remember
Mm-hmm.
his name, the character's name? That
Oh, Bang, the
Obang.
librarian. Yes, Oh
Yeah,
Bang. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So he's asking him where the library is, and he's giving him these cryptic answers, and he just kind of turns around and ignores Strange and walks away. And when they walk out, he sees like this giant library with like
Mm-hmm.
no doors or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he finds his he goes into the library and he brings all the books out using his magic and he finds the book that deals with time,
Mm-hmm.
which is the book of Cagliostro.
Oh boy.
And he starts reading through there, where the book tells him that he needs to gain more power
Mm-hmm.
to cast this spell. And he's like, I know that. He was like, how do I get more power? And to gain more power, he has to absorb energy from these mystical beings.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then we go to that portion of the show.
Yeah. So I want to just that part where Strange. There's two things that occurred to me when I was watching those scenes. Number one of the things that occurred to me was this idea of this sorcerer gaining more knowledge and power, which is a lot like the ending of WandaVision, right? Where we see
Yeah.
Wanda is just, and I'm like, wait a minute, is she getting her books from the Library of Congress? Because we just see these books just disappear, like she's floating, and we just see these books just appearing out of nowhere, and she's just absorbing them. You know what I mean? Just you see the
She's
sigils and
like
everything.
reading them at super fast speeds, it looks like almost.
Yes. So there's definitely I can definitely see there's a connection between this Doctor Strange episode
Mm-hmm.
and uh even like just the storyline of WandaVision. It's not that dissimilar, right? The fact that you had this woman who has these powers, racked with grief over losing a loved one. She lost Vision.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And lost him twice, right? Because the first
Mm-hmm.
time she killed him because he was like, "Listen, you need to kill me so so Thanos does not get this stone, right? That's in my head. So she kills him, and then Thanos turns back time and then kills her, and then kills him again in front of her. And I was just like, oh my God. And so that puts Wanda on this path where she's just racked with grief, much like Steven. And then that causes her to create this fictional reality that is Westview, right? And holding the residents of that town as like sitcom characters. You know what I'm saying? So I could definitely see a connection between that. And of interest, we know that Elizabeth Olsen, who plays Wanda in the live action version, will actually be in the next Doctor Strange movie, right? The Multiverse of Madness. So that's going to be interesting. I mean, of course, this Doctor Strange does not have that same storyline of losing a loved one, but I just thought it was interesting that they made both characters kind of travel a similar trajectory. You know what I'm saying?
I didn't even realize those parallels until you just said it there.
Yeah. And so that was interesting. And then the other scene, the one when Strange realizes or is told that he's going to need more power in order to change time, right? To bring Christine back. It is said in the book that he has to absorb the powers of other beings. Right. So then he opens up this portal, and then it's just like this scene. He starts with like a little gnome, like this little magical gnome.
Actually, he started with that giant octopus thing, and it knocks him out.
He started it first. Yes, you're right. Yeah. And then he was like, all right, let's try again. Let's start smaller.
Yeah.
And so that's when he starts with a little gnome, and then you see him, and then they get these creatures become progressively bigger and more monstrous. And as we see Strange absorbing these beings, we actually see him actually physically transform as well. Yes. Right? Like the last one, he summons back up that tentacled being, right? And then the tentacles are on his back. So now he kind of looks like some scary ass monster. Now he's looking scary, right?
Yeah.
And then when he goes to find Obeng, the librarian, Obeng is old. We didn't even realize like the passage of time, because basically Strange stopped himself from aging because he knew it would take him years and centuries to absorb to get the knowledge, and Obeng just aged, right? And so now we saw him in the bed, and he's about to die. He's on his deathbed, hair white, everything. And I love what Obeng says to him. He was like, "You are half a man living half a life."
Yeah,
because
he's wild.
Because he's already seen that Strange is different. He's darker, not only on the outside, but although Strange does try to use the stone to restore Obeng, and Obeng is like, nope.
Yeah.
I don't want that. And I loved what he said to him. He said, even in our world, death is part of the plan.
Yes.
And that is something that Strange cannot accept. He can't accept. And I think that going back to the scene, I just wanted the scene where he was like absorbing all the other beings, and he was changing, he was becoming darker. That scene really spoke to me, because I thought, like, to me, this whole episode was really like a metaphor about how we deal with our darkness and our inner demons and our grief and our pain and our trauma. And the fact that he was standing there willingly letting all this darkness into him, right? Because he's wrongheadedly believing that he's doing this for the greater good, right? But really just sitting there and just letting all of this darkness inside him. And I was just like, wow. Like, for me, at least I was kind of looking at it personally, like the way that even for us as human beings, as just like regular people, how there's this thing where we kind of get stuck in a groove when something really awful happens to us, and we can't let go of it.
Yeah.
Like we have our absolute point of grief, right? Like, where it's just this thing that happens in our life, and we just cannot let it go. We keep going back to the scene of the crime, so to speak, right? And what it does is and also this idea of Strange freezing time, right? That kind of happens to us when we hold on to that grief. We're not able to progress.
We're just like stuck at that point of our lives.
Exactly. And this is why there are certain people that you meet, they're just so broken inside. It's through no fault of themselves, but it's like they can't they're just there, whatever
Yeah.
trauma, and they can't leave that, whether, it's a car accident, or being sexually molested, God forbid, or just anything awful that happens in your life, or a death of a loved one, and you're just there, because
Yeah,
it
you're
reminds
just
me.
stuck.
Yeah, like I lost my mom when she was 18. She died from a stroke. And I feel like when I look back at my life, I don't feel that like my 20s were just lost there. All
Yeah.
of my 20s, I just felt like I was still at that gravesite, and I was still seeing her body being brought down into the earth. And I just never, while I physically, it looked like I was progressing, right? It was like I would wake up to go to work, and I would do this, and I would do, but emotionally, I was still that 18-year-old girl that lost her mom. And I
Yeah.
brought all that grief and trauma into my relationships and my
Hmm.
friendships. Yeah.
I went through something similar. My mom died when I was 25, and
Oh.
I was 3, 4 years into my marriage then,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it was kind of like the end of my marriage with my daughter's mom, because I just kind of shut down,
Yes.
and I didn't want to be close to anybody, and it was kind
Mm-hmm.
of like the end of it. Yeah, I was just stuck at that moment.
Right. And
So
then you have people around you, because we see throughout the episode, like, people are trying to warn Strange not to go down this path. Obeng warns him, the ancient one, and he's like, "No, I'm going to do what I'm
yeah.
going to do," because he's like, "I got to bring Christine back," or whatever. And so he accomplishes what he sets out to do. He becomes, Sorcerer Supreme, Dark Side edition. And then the episode flips over, and then we see the Doctor Strange. We're brought back to the scene where he was sitting,
In the
considering,
sanctum.
in
Yeah.
the sanctum. And then that's when, and then when he goes outside, that's when he notices, like, it almost looks like Infinity War, where people are just disappearing,
Yeah,
but
but
much worse.
it looks so much cooler. It looked like there was just like this, people looked like almost like half melted.
Yes, with this black goo.
It
Ooh,
was really trippy. It
yeah.
looked so good. The
It,
the art on this show is amazing.
Yeah. And so that's when this ancient one comes through a portal. And at this time we know that the ancient one was dead. And so Strange was like, "Wait a minute, how are you here?" And then she was like, "I'm just sort of like an echo." You know what
Hmm.
I mean? And then that's when and then, like you said, that's when she reveals to him that she had split the timeline, right? So that
Right.
that scene when she had confronted Strange before he disappeared to go to the Library of Cogliostro, she split the timeline when she saw she couldn't get through to
Stop
him.
them.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so we have this Strange that she's talking to now, the one that didn't do it, and then we have the other one, and she was like, basically, the only one who can stop you is you. And then somehow, he finds Wong. Wong is sort of disappearing too, right?
Right. Right.
But somehow he finds the goodness in his heart. He gives him a protection spell and kind of helps him locate this dark Strange. Um,
Yeah, the
Man.
Dark Strange located him and
Oh, he did.
That's
Yes.
it pulled him into the dimension.
Mm-hmm. Oh boy. And then the fight. You can talk about
Ooh.
that. You can talk about that.
Well, first, let me say, like, the mystic part of the Marvel universe is my second favorite part of the Marvel universe. I was like one of the few
Mm,
people when I was growing up that read Doctor Strange comics and
wow.
lived in that side of the universe. The
Yeah.
mutant side is my number one favorite, of course, because of the
Hmm.
X-Men. But so to see this fight in these graphics was just mind blowing. And then the other cool thing I wanted to say is I like
Hmm.
how they introduced all of the audience to magical wards in WandaVision.
Hmm.
And now we get to see magical wards used in this episode. Not only the wards that were put on Doctor Strange's face, but
Hmm.
also the ward that was surrounding him when he was pulled into the dimension.
Yes.
Yeah, so I like how they're like slowly introducing the audience to all these magical things,
Hmm.
and then like showing it to them in like successive series and stuff like that.
Right.
But yeah, this fight between them was just like, it was epic. It
It really
was
was.
epic.
And it to me, it was really like, that's like the inner battle that we have within ourselves, right? Isn't that our,
That's
like,
what it
inner
felt
demon,
like.
right?
Yeah.
Where you
Like
have,
visualized.
yes, right? Manifested, where it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
because Strange had accepted Christine's death. As much as he loved her and missed her, he was like, this is not meant to be. Like, I have to let her go. And this Strange was on some, no, we can bring her back, because they actually go back to the scene. That's where the crash site is, where the car is. And they just go at it, because Strange is like, listen, if you do this, you're literally going to destroy the universe. Okay. Like everything will be gone. And Dark Strange just does not want to listen. He's like, I love her. And I love what Strange said. He was like, this isn't love.
Yeah.
This isn't love. This is, what is the word he said? Obsession, right? Or it's madness.
Madness, yeah.
Yeah, because I remember there was something that Obang had said to Strange when he first came to the library of Cagliostro. Obang said to him, love can break more than your heart. It can shatter your mind.
Yeah, that
I
was
was like,
the phrase that I kind of held from this entire episode.
yeah, because the thing is, when we talk about breakups, whether it's voluntary or involuntary, whether it's because you lose a loved one or you break up, whatever it is, the saying is, oh, my heart is broken. What they don't talk about, like when you lose a loved one, it affects your mind.
It really does.
Like like you cannot concentrate. Like, it is true. It's your heart and your mind. It like both of them are in tandem with each other, and they're both in shock. They're both in trauma. You know what I mean? And we saw that with Dark Strange. He was gone. Like,
he was gone.
And Strange tried. He
And
tried.
it looked like he won. He had that one giant magical blast, and it looked like it made him disappeared. And then all of a sudden, he gets grabbed by a shadow and pulled back down into that dimension, whatever that dimension was that the Dark Strange had control over. And then he kind of like has this illusion of Christine.
Oof.
And he's trying to entice the good Strange to agree with him.
Right.
So, the good Strange, he sees that it's fake, but it doesn't really matter at this point. The Dark Strange is just too powerful, and he ends up absorbing him back into himself.
And he gets the time stone. Yeah.
And he gets the time stone.
No, he had the Dark Strange already had the time stone already.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
They both had it. Yeah. But now it's like 2. So it's even more powerful. Oh, God. That scene was just, that scene, I'm too much of a Marvel junkie. The scene where Good Strange is trying to be enticed by that illusion of Christine when he's pulled into it. It reminded me of, there was another Marvel animated movie that came out a few years ago that was called Hulk Versus, right?
Okay.
And it was Hulk versus Thor. And if you remember the storyline, what happened was Loki and it was Loki and Adora. Was it Adora? She's the one who's she's the Enchantress, or it was the Enchantress, I think. And so Loki and the Enchantress basically work together because they know they can't defeat Thor. And Loki is like, well, the most powerful being is the Hulk, right? And of course he knows that the Hulk would never, or Bruce Banner would never willingly be on his side. So what happens is they do a spell where they separate Bruce Banner from the Hulk.
Oh.
So they have the physical part of the Hulk, and without the mind of Bruce Banner, he's just a mindless savage. And so, Loki goes to war against Thor and Odin and the rest of the Asgardian army to try to take the throne. And meanwhile, they've trapped or put Bruce Banner somewhere, like, since it's his mind, they put him in this dimension, and in the dimension, in order for Bruce not to come back, right? They create this illusion of him being with Betty. So it's the life. You see them in this beautiful countryside cabin. They wake up in the morning and they're having coffee, and Bruce is like, oh my God, this is what I wanted. Because, his relationship with Betty was very complicated because of the fact that he was with the Hulk. And I think there are shades of abuse, like, anger issues in there, which we'll get into another day. But he has like this perfect fantasy of him and Betty being together. And Bruce finally is like, wait, no, something's not right. Right? Because we're talking about the mind-body connection, right? One can't live without the other, much like the Matrix. And Bruce is like, no, this reality isn't real. And
Yeah.
Betty is like, no, you have to stay with me. He was like, I can't, because I think that's when he starts to see images of what's going on, how the Hulk is being used. And it was the most heartbreaking scene because Bruce had finally gotten what he wanted, right? He was at peace. He didn't have the Hulk to, you know what I mean, to torture him or anything. And then it was like, oh, I gotta go back and I gotta deal with this. And he was like, I gotta go. Because at this point, I think Bruce sort of had a friendship with Thor. And he was like, I can't stay. This isn't even real. And so he goes back, and then he goes back into the mind of the Hulk and turns against Loki or whatever. And that's what that kind of reminded me of when Strange had to reject that, you know, that mirage.
Yeah,
of
you can't have the
Christine.
thing you love, the thing you
Yeah.
really wanted.
Yeah. It's hard. Like death is hard because you know, Robert, it's so final. It's
Yes.
so final, and there's no negotiation. There's no, well, can I have my mom back? Can I, you know what I mean? Let me just talk to her for 5 minutes. That's it.
Yeah,
Like,
especially when it comes out of the blue too.
especially, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's so shocking and it's so sudden. And then it's like, you're thinking about all the things that you wish that you had said, and the things they wish you could have done, but you can't, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it just is what it is. And you can't follow them to wherever, you know, whatever you believe in, heaven or nirvana or whatever, you can't follow, because you're in the land of the living, and the land of the dead. That's it, you know? And that's an excruciating type of pain. The finality of that is excruciating
Yeah.
when you lose a
Yeah.
loved one. And that's what, like, watching Doctor Strange, like my heart was in my throat the whole time I was watching this episode. But
Me
yes.
too. And
Yeah.
then the ending was just super tragic.
Let's
Like he
talk about that.
absorbs Strange, he
Mm-hmm.
turns into this like monster, which is like an amalgamation of everything he absorbed. You see like
Mm-hmm.
tentacles and wings and everything all in
Right.
one.
Right.
And he uses his power, and you see him raise the vehicle that Christine died in, and he brings her back to life. And he looks like this monster, and she's like crawling away as fast as she can because she
Oof.
doesn't know what this is. And
Mm.
she looks down at herself, and she's like melting into the dimension like
Right.
everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that the visuals were just. And then this is the part where you were talking about earlier, where Strange realized what he's done finally, and
Yes.
he's like, he can see the Watcher there watching, and he's like, "Fix this. You're a god."
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you think of Jeffrey Wright here?
Number one, the performance, that scene was amazing, because going back to our earlier scene, when Strange was bringing up those when Strange was bringing up those beings to absorb their powers, remember, the
Yeah,
Watcher was watching, and then Strange turned around and he was like, is somebody there?
yeah, he heard something.
Robert, I screamed. I was
I
like,
know you did. I know you did.
I was like, this is it. This is it. But I thought that was going to be it. I really, really did. I was like, okay, so I'm getting close to, because in our last podcast, Robert and I had theorized that because we were seeing more of a presence of the Watcher throughout the episodes, that eventually there was going to be a, a interaction of sorts with the Watcher in whatever reality he was narrating, that he would break the fourth wall, so to speak.
Right.
I did not know he was going to break the wall like that.
Woo! He came with the heat.
Wow. And so Strange is like, so now you see like the universe, like you can kind of see like the world is just blackening around them, and
Yeah, it's
it's
like
like,
imploding on him, and
yes,
he's trying to use his magic to push it out and keep it away.
yes. And then the Watcher that's my man. He was like, listen, we told you, we warned you, don't do this. He was like, because remember, Strange at this point is bargaining and negotiating, and he was
Yes.
like, just take me and just punish me, just save everybody else, because now he's thinking about Wong, and you know what oh no, that was the good Strange, sorry. So now he's trying to save Christine, and now he's seeing the consequences of what he's done, and the Watcher was like, nope, can't help you, and then
Yep.
and the episode ends with the destruction of the world. Everything's
Of
gone.
the universe.
Of the universe. And then you just see the ending credits. And I was like, there's no coup de grace. There's no do machin. Like, there's no saving grace for this guy. He's done what he's done. And that is another searing and hurtful lesson that we have to learn is that sometimes the things that we do, some things can't be undone.
Nope.
The damage that we cause, sometimes there's not a second chance or a third. It just is what it is, right? Much like he didn't accept Christine's death, he could not accept the fact that his actions had caused the end, because he always thought that he was arrogant, much like Good Strange had told him. He was like, you're an arrogant person. You think you can fix things and you can't. And so he thought that by bringing back Christine, somehow like the world, like the flowers would bloom and the rainbows. No, you actually caused her to die all over again. Now you really can't bring her back.
I am so impressed that they went there. Like, I never thought I would see anything like this, like end like this in the Marvel universe. And I am officially calling this now dead universe the 666 universe.
Wow. I mean, basically, right?
Because he looked like a devil when he became Dark Strange.
Ooh, yeah. It was just, and the fact, like when Christine looked at him and saw what he had become, and I thought to myself, I was like, again, with this theme of trauma and pain, is that sometimes the things within us that we don't heal, the things that corrupt us or make us ugly like it affects our relationships with our loved ones, right? Like we think, like he thought that Christine's love could save him. And sometimes love is not enough, right? When you are a broken person inside, whether trauma, whatever it is, when you're that broken inside, the person that you love cannot save you from that darkness. The only person that could save you is you, right?
Yes.
Which was really why she split the timeline. So if Dark Strange had taken a time to at least listen to Good Strange and if they could have reached out to each other, there could have been a healing. But he didn't want that.
Nah.
Because Good Strange, let's think of him as being healed and whole and good. But that broken and grief-stricken, he didn't want to let that in. Not like that, right?
No.
Yeah. So you have to take him.
I was just going to say, and the very last words that Dark Strange hears from Christine is, "Steven, what have you done?"
Woo! Because now she's understanding what he did to bring her back, and she would have never agreed to that.
Nope.
And which is the irony, right? The very reason why he loved Christine so much and wanted to bring her back was because of her goodness. But her goodness would never allow him to do what he did. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Wow, this was like a heavy episode.
People are going to have to sit with this episode. They're going to have to really sit with this and understand what A.C. Bradley, the screenwriter, is saying. There's a lot of hard lessons in this one. And I was like, ooh, I wasn't ready for this lesson. You know what I mean? I'm lucky I had breakfast. I was like, I think maybe because I was looking at reactions of people watching it, and I was like, I think I need to eat first before I watch it.
I watched this at like 5 a.m. and I was like, oh, wow, this is starting off the day kind of rough.
And you somehow went back to sleep after watching that?
No, I didn't go back to sleep. No. I got my mind racing. I was like, whoa, this is like deep.
It is. And it does kind of have ties to episode 3 when we saw what happened to Hank Pym, how his grief twisted him. And I think this is what A.C. Bradley and this series, at least with the themes of grief, I think this is what she's trying to tell us, is that we have to own it. Like we have to own that pain, and we have to own that grief, and we have to work, whatever it is that it is, we got to work through it.
Yeah, you got to do the work.
You got to do the work. There's no do-overs. You can't. Well, I wish I could make it different. I could go back in at the woulda, shoulda, couldas. You can't. And regret, to me, people say that jealousy is one of the worst emotions. Yes, but to me, regret is one of the worst.
Ooh,
it's the worst, because at least with jealousy, you can kind of work through it. It's like, okay, what am I jealous of? Because usually jealousy is about insecurity, right? It's about something that you lack within yourself. You might see in someone, and you can work on that. But the regret is when you've done something and you can't undo it. And that's that.
Yeah, there's no coming back, and you have to deal with the consequences.
Yeah. I love this episode. Listen, it might be my favorite, and that's saying a lot. It might be the number 1 or 2.
Me too. As far as like emotional impact, this one has had the most emotional impact on me.
Yeah.
Like my favorite as far as like enjoying and joyful is the Black Panther one.
Mm-hmm.
But this one is like hitting on some serious topics, and it like it really had me sad.
Yeah. 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 And like going back to what I said about that scene about Strange, in absorbing all of those, the darkness and the evil forces. It's like, that's something that I'm thinking for myself. Like, there's something on Twitter called doom scrolling, or on social media, right? Where, and especially right now, I don't know when AC Bradley wrote this episode. I don't know when this episode was written, but it is right on time. Okay. Because we're living in a trash fire of time right now. We've got the pandemic, we've got the anti-maskers, the anti-vaxxers, and then we've still got the MAGA supporters, the Trump support. Like, they're like everything, like the world is on freaking fire right now. And sometimes just going on social media and just reading just more and more bad news. I was telling you, sometimes I'll log into Twitter in a good mood and it will immediately darken my mood. It will
Yeah, and
actually. Go ahead.
no, and I was saying it, and it makes you feel like that the scenes where he's just absorbing all these mystical beings, just like
Mm-hmm.
bad news after bad news. You're just like seeing
Mm,
on the timeline, and it's just like
mm-hmm.
twisting us up like Strange looked at the end.
Yes. And the thing is, what Strange didn't realize is that with all that power, when he was in the library of Cagliostro, right? Let's think of the library as like knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
He could have used that magic to heal himself.
Yep.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, he could have used that, like, how do I get over this grief? How do I work through this grief of losing someone that I loved? But
Yeah.
he didn't want to use that. He didn't want to use it that way. And that's how I feel about, social media. And let me be clear, I'm not anti social media at all. I think it has its purpose. I think it's good. I mean, speaking, and I've been open with people about this, I've gotten quite a few opportunities being on Twitter. Someone will be like, "Oh, hey, I saw you tweet about a certain show. Would you like to write about it?" Or there's a panel. So I've gotten some coin off of Twitter. Don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking it. But what I've realized over the last few years is that I have to use Twitter and not let Twitter use me. Right?
Yeah.
It's it's
Yeah.
it's an app, okay? And people like, Twitter is real. Yes, Twitter is real. And so therefore, if you know the power and the influence and what Twitter can do, then like Twitter is like, it's a power source, right? Much like magic is a source of power. You have to know how to wield it.
Yes.
And you have to know how to use it to benefit yourself, how to heal yourself, and not use it to hurt people, right? Much like Strange was using his magic to hurt people, right? To make himself feel more powerful. Do we not see this on a daily basis, Robert?
That's
Like,
such a good comparison.
I'm
Such a
just,
good comparison.
and I'm including myself in it because I'm not trying to be sanctimonious here. It's like, I'm constantly having to correct. There are sometimes I'll put a tweet out, and sometimes people will be like, I just saw you tweet something, and I deleted it because I was like, you know what? That energy of that tweet doesn't need to be out there.
Yeah. No, I agree. I do the same thing. I do
Yeah.
the same thing. I
Mm-hmm.
really
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten to the point now where I like really take my time before I tweet something out. Like
Yes.
just sit on it
Yes.
for a little bit and
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like think this through before sending anything out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes you need, like, he was in this space where he could have taken the time to meditate, to heal. Think about his memories of Christina. He was like, no, I'm gonna fuck up the universe. And I
Yeah, he
don't care.
basically had access to the resources to find out the knowledge to do anything to help himself.
Right. And he chose, and isn't that another
He
metaphor?
chose violence.
He chose, and we joke about that, especially on Black Twitter. It's like, he chose. But what are we really saying when we choose violence? Because what people don't
Hmm.
understand is that when even if the person is wrong and you have every justification to be upset, right? And I'm not just talking physical violence, but like verbal violence, right? Or
Right.
emotional violence. When you partake of that, you become corrupted with it.
You
It
absolutely
corrupts
do.
you as well as as well as the wrongdoer. So it's not about, and let me be clear, if somebody wrongs you or someone does something to you, you should absolutely stand up for yourself, and you should absolutely hold that person accountable. But there's ways that you can do it. Like, use your big girl words, like use your grown up words. And you know what I mean? And we see this on Twitter, like people just throwing tantrums. just throwing tantrums and just hating on people and just fighting. And it's like, but for what? Like, I remember when I joined Twitter around the time that you and I became friends, like, it used to be a fun place. Like, people would share, you know, like, oh, I like this show, or oh, maybe I did, even if you disagreed with the person. But now it's so polar. Everything is just
really
black
is.
and white. Yeah. So yeah, I would really I would highly recommend, please watch episode 4 of What If, and like, listen to this podcast and really understand like what this episode is saying, because it's profound. At least to me, I found this to be a very profound episode.
It was for me too. It was for me, and I'm definitely watching it again tonight.
Me too.
See what other little tidbits I can pull out of it, because there was a lot going on.
They were. Well, thank you, Robert, for joining me for another episode, another recap of What If. We will be back next week to review episode 5. I think there's 9 episodes in this season, right? So we have about 5 more.
Yeah, it's like 9 or 10. Yeah,
9 or 10. Like, wow. I'm like, you know, and that for you to be episode 4 and you're still swinging out the park like that. Hopefully, it's just upwards from there. I don't know. There might be a couple of duds. We don't know. But we will be here. We will give you the real tea if we like it or not. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you, Robert, on social media?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Robert C. Young.
Thank you. And of course, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at FilmFatale_NYC. And if you have any questions or comments that you would like to direct to me or Robert, you can use the hashtag The Spectrum Lounge and use our Twitter hashtags, our Twitter handles as well. And we'll be happy to talk to you, whether you agree or not. So thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Spectrum Lounge. See you on the other side.